A lot of people have expressed concern over the safety of Tommy Robinson whilst he's incarcerated for contempt of court. Of course, the effect of the order is that he will serve half of his 18 months less 3 days sanction for contempt of court. And so I thought I would refer back to something within those sanction remarks, which I did mention in a previous video, which I think is worth reminding people of here. So first of all, if you do like these tidbits and updates, which I think you might find helpful, please do click that like button, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Then you'll get updates. That's the only way you can really guarantee updates of my new videos coming out. And it does also help me to reach a wider audience. So thank you very much for doing that. So let me refer you back to this document here, which I found actually quite interesting because this sanction reasonings document goes over, in fact, what the judge put into mitigation. Now, of course, there are aggravating factors and mitigating factors that the judge takes into account when deciding a sentence. Now, under mitigation, aside from Tommy Robinson having complied with this order for a period of around 18 months, which is a perfectly normal thing to talk about, the judge also then looked at the prison conditions, which I found particularly interesting because of his status. Now, the judge said in the highlighted portion here, I take into account the impact that prison conditions will have on the defendant. It is well known that the high prison population in adult male prisons has impacted on prison conditions. Of course, then it references the Deputy Prime Minister writing to the Lord Chief Justice about prisoners being held in crowded conditions, as well as being further away from home. And the judge said that there is no evidence that the recent release of prisoners as a result of the change to early release provisions has substantially changed the position. The government has not communicated to the courts that the prison conditions have returned to normal state. So in other words, it hasn't really made any difference. But then more interestingly here, the judge said, further, there may be particularly onerous impact on the defendant. He's well known. So are his views. They provoke considerable hostility. The prison governor has a legal obligation to take reasonable steps to keep the defendant safe. The discharge of that obligation may impact on the conditions in which the defendant is kept, reducing his ability to associate with others. In this respect, incarceration may be more onerous for him than for others. I take into account the evidence that was read to me by Ms. Swass to the effect that the previous incarceration had on his mental health. This is a further factor to consider when determining the impact of prison conditions. Now, most importantly here, just to distinguish, these remarks here were mainly in respect of the sanction that the judge applied in this case. They were not specifically directed to how he was going to be kept and so on. That is, of course, not the role or the responsibility of the judge here. But I do find it interesting that the judge has made those remarks to reduce to writing and express concern that the incarceration will impact on his well-being because he's well known. So are his views, that his views provoke hostility, and noting that the prison governor has a legal obligation to take reasonable steps to keep him safe. And it says that the discharge of that obligation may impact on the conditions in which he's kept. So whilst this written reasoning here is not the judge telling anyone what to do, and it's not the judge saying this is how he should be kept and where he should be kept and so on, these reasonings were to support the sanction that the judge made. However, they can be referred back to. They will doubtless be looked at by the prison governor and any subsequent prison governor when he's moved and how he's cared for and so on. And they will have to keep this in mind because if anything should happen, then they will obviously look at all of the circumstances and they will look back to judge's remarks here, and they could certainly be looked at in light of anything that should happen moving forward. But overall, the prison system does have a duty of care, of course. They have a special duty of care, which means that that duty of care needs to change according to who is under their care. It is different from a simple and standard neighbourly duty of care or even road user duty of care. You have a duty to other road users when you drive a vehicle on the road. So by having the privilege of driving around and your driving license, you therefore have a duty to other road users in that sense. This is different in that they are kept in care. And so by being under the care of the prison system, there is a special duty of care with all the rules and the regulations, the codes of practice and so on that apply to that system. And having some knowledge of the prison system, I do know that prisoners are moved about quite a lot, often at short notice and with seemingly, let's just call it a questionable justification. But that is what it is and needs to be challenged on its individual basis. I am familiar with some cases where that has been challenged, is being challenged, and there are certain arguments to make as to what decisions are made over prisoners and so on. Obviously, I can't speak about specific cases, and those comments are not directed specifically at this Tommy Robinson case. I just felt that some of you may find it useful and interesting to refer back to these notes from this judge here in this document, because whilst I did go through it, I think I went through it in one of my previous videos, they do relate specifically to concerns that people have raised in this case about where he's being kept and whether or not he's kept in safe conditions and so on. So that's really all I can say about that at this moment, and without speaking specifically about the case, of course, which I can't. But I thought you'd find that useful. So if you do find it useful, please do like the video and subscribe. And as always, thank you for watching.